My pleasure to welcome Michael Barnard, who is an expert for these two markets. And we now are curious to hear about how wind power develops in the United States and Canada, in particular the US, with a very kind of dynamic political situation at this point of time, and Canada. Michael, a great welcome to you, and look forward now to hearing from you.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you to the rest of the speakers for bringing us up to date on the rest of the Americas. Michael Barnard, Chief Strategist with TFIE Strategy, Inc., former Senior Fellow of Wind with the American think tank on on renewable energy, and currently based in Canada, thankfully. Let's start with the United States. You may have heard there's an election coming up very shortly. Possibly you've heard that. And that's a big news election for the wind industry and for renewables and for the climate. The current administration has got strong anti-wind rhetoric and anti-climate change rhetoric, but 70% of US congressional districts have strong wind industry components. So the statements from the federal level are not aligned with actual Republican states, and certainly not with Democratic-leaning states in the United States. And so what we'll see out of this election is likely a sea change in terms of support. It has been problematic this year and over the past few years. The coronavirus obviously is very concerning in the United States, 232,000 dead as of yesterday, and a projected 400,000 by January 1st, which is to say equivalent to the war deaths in World War II for the United States for the entirety of World War II. The current projection is over 600,000 dead by the time the coronavirus runs its course as the most probable. And so this is a very serious concern for the entire nation. The variance in coronavirus response is significant across partisan divides there as well. In the wind industry specifically, while 14.3 gigawatts were projected for the year, at mid-year only 4.3 gigawatts of new capacity had been added. It's unlikely they're going to achieve the 14.3 gigawatts. Force majeure clauses have been invoked, and major turbine manufacturing sites have laid off hundreds of staff. Quite a bit of the effort is significantly reduced. Governmental response so far from the Republican president and Senate control is fossil fuel industry support and nothing for wind energy. No extension of the industrial tax credit for wind energy in the production tax credit for wind energy in the United States. There is good news potential out of this, however. One of the things I've did this year is at Clean Technica asked me to do a presidential climate policy report card across Obama, Biden, Trump, Pence, and the potential Biden-Harris incumbents. So while wind energy has not been a focus at the federal level, as you can see, we'll probably see in the electrical generation row an improvement. Obama and Biden's strategy was an all-of-the-above energy strategy, which included a lot of natural gas. Trump and Pence's strategy has been strongly focused on coal and fossil fuels, so obviously not aligned with climate goals and policies. Biden and Harris's pledges in their plan related to electrical generation are much more positive than the Obama-Biden activities. At one point, the Biden plan included a high voltage direct current trunk down through Central America to Latin America to provide a transmission corridor for renewable energy linking the Americas, in part a response to China's Belt and Road. That's fallen out of their current plan, but internal to the United States, the current plan has a national high voltage direct current grid to enable renewable energy of all types to move across the country. The selection of Kamala Harris as his running mate is also very significant. In my assessment of the various leading candidates' climate change plans for Clean Technica, Kamala Harris had the strongest one, and she is in a position to do something about it. There are significant challenges that will come out of the likely transition. At present, Biden and Harris are strongly projected to be the most likely winners. It's likely that the House of Congress will remain in Democratic hands, and in fact, Democratic control will increase. And there's a strong probability that Senate will also switch to Democratic. For the wind industry, those are all positive alignment opportunities. However, you may remember that in 2016, there were similar polling assertions about Trump versus Clinton, and Trump managed to pull out a win in that country. So right now, the voter turnout and the polling and advanced polling strongly supports a Democratic blue wave, which would be strongly advantageous for wind and also for climate change in general. The Biden-Harris campaign has pledged to re-enter the Paris Accord and also the Kigali Amendment, which is less pertinent directly to wind energy, but still important. Canada is different. We are managing coronavirus much more effectively than the United States has. It is being treated very seriously here. We were one of the global hotspots for SARS in 2003, and that has led us to have stronger institutional memories than the United States has maintained for pandemics. Our expected 400 megawatts of new wind energy for this year has not materialized, unsurprisingly. Force majeure and frustration lawsuits are in existence. The governmental response for COVID-19 was $16 billion for the fossil fuel industry so far. And so that is a strong focus of the federal government and provincial governments to bail out the oil and gas industry, especially. And that's unfortunate. The electricity demand declined in all the provinces, but Ontario saw net export expanses and mostly out of their nuclear generation capacity. We've now seen that the Saskatchewan now is starting to see a pipeline for new wind energy. Alberta's wind energy pipeline is reasonably strong, with several hundred megawatts in construction or in plan. The rest of the country is very light for wind energy. The Ford administration in Ontario is the one that tore up 758 renewable energy contracts with small and medium-sized providers and shuttered construction of 2 separate wind farms of reasonable sizes, grid utility scale wind farms, for ideological and political reasons. We see no improvement there. Quebec had completed its very significant build out of 4 gigawatts of wind capacity and is not projecting substantial increases there. British Columbia, of course, is hydroelectric bound, is building a major dam in the northeast, but is not building new wind energy at this point. 3 points of positive assertion out of this, though. First of all, the Canadian Renewable Energy Association has merged the wind and solar lobbying groups under CanWIA's Robert Horning, who many of you probably know. And so the scale of advocacy for renewables and the coordination of advocacy for renewables has improved in Canada as of this year. Second, the National Resources Canada has released a new geomap of all wind farm locations and wind turbines in Canada. As you can see, we have some very far north. That was done in, people that I've worked with, and many of you probably know Tim Weiss and Tom Levy contributed to the development of this initiative. So it's a very positive thing for Canada to be able to see exactly where the wind turbines are, capacities and the like. The final piece about the federal government, while their actions this year have been focused on the fossil fuel industry, which dominates in Alberta and Saskatchewan, the speech from the throne on September 23rd advocated a green recovery, committed to exceeding our Paris Accord targets for 2030, and committed to legislation which would bring Canada to carbon neutrality by 2050. That obviously is a very substantial transformation from today. The United States and Canada share an unfortunate distinction of having among the highest per capita CO2 emissions globally. And that's going to take a lot to change. That's the formal presentation. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that was a wonderful overview. Also, thanks a lot for your comments about the US election situation. That's very helpful, of course, to understand the situation. I've got one question related to that slide where you presented the stance of the different candidates or the president, vice president teams. US military, you were presenting Obama with an A, and I think it was Trump with F, and then a D for Biden. What is that referring to? Military using renewable energy?
No, under the Obama administration, he drew down foreign troops from 150,000 in active conflict zones around the world to 15,000. He's radically altered the strategic stance of the US military from boots on the ground and ships in the sea to cyber terrorism and to drone warfare. What this did is it created an almost 20% decrease in US military fossil fuel use. And as the US military is the largest single organization in the world for energy consumption and averages 80% of all federal energy consumption for the United States, that is actually a very significant transformation of emissions. He also entered the Paris Accord, of course, and agreed under the Paris Accord and committed the United States at that point to reporting military emissions for the first time. You'll remember that was excluded from the Kyoto Protocol, partly because the United States could not support that at the time. What this would have led to and has led to in other countries is military reporting of emissions. Under the Trump administration, the focus on declines in US military emissions went away at the federal level. The US military continued to make efforts in that regard. The reason that Biden and Harris are currently a D on that is simply because they are silent on it. Okay. That is understandable in a campaign year. The American military is currently as big as the next 7 militaries in the world. It's a very large voting bloc of currently acting service people and veterans. And right now, Trump and Biden have lost the US military for the first time for Republicans in decades. Typically, the active US military personnel vote Republican by a 2/3 majority. But right now they're polling at 38% support for Trump and Biden. So the Biden and Harris campaign are silent on this. I expect that once they start acting in their roles as president and vice president, and the Democratic Party has control, that their actual policies will be much more positive than their campaign pledges.
Thank you very much. I think this is very interesting. I was also thinking of and wondering, because I remember from reports also some numbers that the US military was actually, or used to be, one of the biggest investors in renewable energy, which is not so, of course, well known. Have you any insights whether that's changed?
Um, they were an investor in research for certain classes of renewable energy. DARPA-E was a federal and fairly strongly militarily aligned effort. They have bought some renewable energy. It's not been their primary focus. The U.S. military's stance is that global warming is a strategic threat to the U.S. military for two reasons. One is the obvious increase in global conflicts, especially in zones which are problematic with fragile nation states today. But secondarily, because the U.S. military maintains bases at sea level globally. And all of those bases are at risk of sea level rise. They've had military air bases at sea level, which have flooded in recent hurricane events, which is something that's unprecedented. So the ability of the U.S. military to project force around the world is threatened by global sea level rise and extreme weather events, and they're very clear on that. They are not aligned with President Trump and his administration in terms of the reality and severity of climate change. They have continued their efforts related to decarbonization, but without strong federal strategic alignment, it's more difficult for them. And so they have, it's been a reduction in that. One of the key programs that they had globally has been canceled. It was a military base housing efficiency program. And unfortunately, that's gone by the wayside, at least temporarily.
Oh, thank you. I think that explains sufficiently indeed why you have the A, F, and D then. Okay, thanks so much, Mike. That was indeed very good. Of course, from Canada, not so good news, but I see that there is a question, or Everaldo would like to ask you a question. Everaldo, please, you can unmute yourself and maybe also switch on your camera if you like and ask directly.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, I can, Everaldo.
Yes. Okay. Congratulations, Michael, for your nice presentation. My question is related to the proposal that you have made, that you have mentioned from binding related to the high DC voltage transmission line between US and South America. Can you explain a little bit what kind of proposal is this?
Yeah, in Biden's original climate change plan, when he was a candidate for the presidential nominee, his proposal was to work with Central America and run a high voltage direct current line down through the Central America down to into South America. The intent there was to provide a strong industrial linkage for clean energy transmission from Canada down into South America. The intent there would be to counter some of the Chinese Belt and Road initiatives where China is investing in infrastructure and industrial and economic projects around the world. It would have been a soft power America's counter to that, which would have been strongly beneficial. It would have allowed northern Brazilian wind energy to flow up to Mexico and to the southern United States. In concept, it's a very limited version of the Chinese proposal for a global polar HVDC intercontinental grid, which they've projected as being a cost of, I think, $2 trillion, which isn't that much really. And so it would have been a lot much less expensive than that. It would have been very beneficial. Certainly, high voltage direct current is the future of energy distribution globally. The recent announcement of the major solar farm in Australia, which is to transmit electricity through 2 underwater HVDC cables to Singapore, is the state of the future. Sorry, Stefan, it's not green hydrogen and shipping green hydrogen. It's HVDC and electrons. Green hydrogen is, in my opinion, a bit of a red herring. Does that answer your question, Everaldo?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is certainly, I think we should maybe have a separate webinar on the future of the energy supply. We had already one, as I mentioned, on hydrogen, but also the role of decentralized versus centralized solutions, and where does it make sense to have HVDC power lines, as you said, and where does it make sense to focus more? And it's very interesting that obviously the world develops into a kind of hybrid system. When you look at, for example, Australia, that the domestic battery systems are now becoming part of the national supply system. It's not only used for their houses, individual houses, but for the whole national system. Yeah, I would not like to take others or prevent others from asking any questions. Do we have other comments or questions? Also to our other speakers. So if we do not have any other comments and questions, then also a great thank you from my side to all our speakers who kept their time. I think this is the first time that all the speakers indeed stayed within the requested time frame. Congratulations for this as well. And I think this was an excellent webinar of getting an idea of what is the situation of wind power, beyond wind power, renewable energy in the Americas. Great thank you to all of you, to the speakers, also to those in the audience. As in the past, we will make all these presentations available. The live stream is still ongoing on YouTube, so you can check that right away. And the complete kind of webinar will be available right away, but we will also make all the individual presentations available so that people who want to see only Uruguay, they don't need to listen to or just search for that. Again, from my side, great thank you. We now conclude this webinar, this meeting, and again, announcing that our next webinar that's been scheduled is the 3rd World Community Power Conference, which will take place on the 19th of November, which will be a major event in the morning and in the afternoon, so that we can enable people from Australia, Asia, up to the Western Hemisphere, where you are, Michael, west of North America, to join, maybe not at the same time, but be part of the same conference and meeting and discuss the status of community energy around the world, with a special focus of the role of women. So the focus will be more on the socioeconomic, social aspects of that. With this, thank you. Have a nice day. Have a nice evening, and look forward to see you all soon again. And I think it's time again to say, stay safe, stay healthy. Goodbye.